Looking through old family photos, I found someone horrifying in the background. My parents refused to tell me much about my childhood whenever I asked. They never showed me any videos or photos from when I was a kid, telling me they all got lost in a tragic house fire. We've lived in the same house for 19 years, so I knew they were lying. I just didn't know what they were trying to hide. That was until I found the photos. They were sitting there, tucked behind a bunch of antique clutter in the back of the attic. I was moving away to college in a couple of weeks, so decided to search the attic for old memorabilia to take with me. This was the first time I'd been allowed in my attic, so I don't know what I was expecting to find. I just didn't expect for my terrifying childhood secrets to be revealed when I opened that photo album. There were 3 photos that stood out to me. The first photo looked completely innocent. It was a blonde-haired kid with bright blue eyes. It was me, playing in the backyard. I didn't understand why my parents would hide this from me. It seemed so normal. Smiling, I turned the page. The next picture showed a little blonde me next to a nearly identical boy with his arm around my shoulder. It was my brother Matt. We had the same blue eyes, the same crooked smile, and the same dimpled cheeks. I hate to admit it, but I would get most of the attention from my parents. Matt hated that. He was always second before me. My grin faded, and I rubbed a hand over my chest, just above my heart. Then, hoping to find more memories like the first one, I flipped the page. That is, until I reached the end. The final picture in the album seemed at first to be just like all the rest. In it, I sat amongst other kids, all making silly faces and looking generally happy. I nearly closed the album, but then I spotted it. Behind the girl's head, poking out just above her hair, was a face. Below it, a child-sized body wore the same green school shirt as the rest of us, but the face itself seemed distended and stretched, almost inhuman, and his eyes were black. See for yourself. I stared at the picture and brought the album close enough to brush my nose, and I looked into those vacant black eyes, and I thought of the picture with my brother. I could almost hear Matt whisper, "Just smile," and I could almost feel his hand digging into my elbow. I closed the photo album with a pop. Then, rubbing the familiar spot on my chest, I moved toward the trash bag full of discarded memories. But something nibbled at the back of my mind. I can't verbalize the feeling exactly, but I felt somehow like throwing the photos away would be wrong. So, I put the small album into my back pocket, crossed the manicured lawn between the storage room and my parents' new house, and went inside. I should have thrown it away. I looked up to my mirror, and my reflection stared back at me. The white blonde hair had faded to a sandy, drab brown, much like my brother's. My skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones and dark circles, the calling card of night shift workers the world over, ringed bloodshot eyes. I leaned closer to the mirror, as if staring for long enough might improve my appearance. Something flashed in my reflection, and I jumped backwards with a yelp. For a moment, so fast I couldn't sure it had actually happened. I'd seen my eyes, my reflection's eyes, flash a deep, empty black. Slowly, I looked back to the glass. My eyes were blue, the same blue from the childhood photos. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and shook my head. I thought again of the photo laying on my bed. I thought of that stretched, inhuman face, and I thought of those deep, dark eyes, like the eyes I'd seen in my reflection just a moment ago. The next morning, I realized I'd fallen asleep, the photo still in my lap. It all came rushing back to mind, and I could once again think only of those eyes. I rolled out of bed and found the picture on the ground where it had fallen from my hands as I fell asleep. I studied the image. The green school shirt had the years 1999 and 2000 circled around a logo. That would have been second grade. Had I switched to private school yet? I examined the mascot on the shirt. A cat of some kind. The public school then. Still holding the photo, I crossed the empty hallway into the kitchen. I had to find the scene where the picture had been taken. I don't know why. Maybe for the same reason I couldn't throw the album away. "Morning, Dan," my mother called vaguely over a newspaper. "Mom, can I borrow the Jeep?" "Sure, keys are on the counter." She didn't look up from the paper. "Where are you headed?" I was already walking away though, and she asked the question to my back. I didn't respond. The musty scent of the car's shag carpet upholstery brought to mind scenes of high school parties and evenings when I probably shouldn't have driven home. At the first turn of the ignition, the car mustered only a sputter, but after 2 attempts, its old engine coughed reluctantly to life. I tapped the name of my old school into Google Maps. I spent so little time in my hometown, I needed directions practically everywhere. As I drove through the neighborhood though, the scenes became familiar, if changed a bit by the city's breakneck development, and I followed the directions toward the school. I pulled past a welcome sign, emblazoned with the cat mascot, through a campus emptied by the winter break. The place had changed little over the years. A row of brick schoolhouse buildings sat vacant, blinds down and darkened, near a wood-chip mulch playground. Though I hadn't visited in some time, I still knew the layout well, and it didn't take long to find the parking lot. I pulled the aging wagon into a spot close to the sidewalk, and when I turned the key in the ignition, the old beast went silent with a sputter that sounded almost like relief. I pulled the picture from my pocket. That face, those eyes. It took me a moment to take in the other details of the photo. It looked like we were sitting on a set of stone steps, or an amphitheater. I walked toward the playground, looking up from the picture to scan the school grounds. The steps had been by a big empty field, I remembered, which must have been near the playground. The school grounds weren't that big. I crossed the mulch, passing a swing set, and spotted the steps off in the distance. There, behind the squat brick school building, a bit overgrown now, sat the gray mottled stone steps. I thought I spotted a figure, sitting on one of the steps in the distance, but I couldn't be sure. I sped up. The small form came more sharply into view as I got closer. I couldn't make out many details, but could tell now that the figure wore a green shirt. I called out, "Hey!" but the figure didn't move. Closer now, I stopped dead, and my stomach dropped. The scene was unmistakable. 3 gray stone steps, wide and long, framed by tall trees bare in the winter. And there on the first step, where in the photo I'd sat smiling with my friends, was a kid in a green shirt with a sandy, nondescript brown bowl cut. His head was down though, and I couldn't see his face. I stopped and stared, but just as I opened my mouth to speak, to ask the kid who he was and what he was doing here at the empty school during Christmas break, his head snapped up, so fast that I barely registered the motion. The kid's face was twisted and stretched beyond human proportions. It looked almost like he'd been burned, but his skin didn't have the shiny, raised keloid quality of scarring. He had all the features of a human face, but each was twisted and wrong in some way. His mouth was small, puckered, and almost circular, but still somehow stretched into a warped, close-mouthed grin. His nose was smashed flat, and his eyes were black. His eyes were black and I was falling. His eyes were black, and Matt was pushing me to the ground. His eyes were black, and my brother's friends were holding me down, and their eyes were black. His eyes were black, and I was small, and I couldn't fight back, and my brother was grinning when he pressed the white-hot twisted metal wire hanger down onto my chest, and his eyes were black, and his friends were laughing, and I smelled cooking meat, and I screamed, and smoke rose from my chest and wafted up into my mouth, and into my eyes were black, and it burned, and it burned, and it burned, and his eyes were black. I came to in the grass by the steps, climbing slowly to wobbling legs. I rubbed the old scar over my heart and dusted my pants off. The warped, twisted kid was gone. In a daze, I made my way carefully back to the old Wagoneer. The beast rattled to life. On autopilot, I backed out of the small parking lot and drove slowly into the surrounding neighborhood. At least 10 minutes passed before I realized that I had no idea where I was going. So I pulled over, tapped my parents' new address into Google Maps, and still shaking, followed the brief route home. I hated talking about it, but my brother has always been my biggest bully. During school, he would always call me names, kick me to the ground, and humiliate me in front of my class. I never knew why he did it, but I would always try to give him the benefit of the doubt since he's my own brother. I think I know who that kid was. I think it's my brother. I parked in front of the house and made my way up the stone walkway. Still moving automatically, I turned the key in the lock. It was already open. I passed my mom. She said something. I didn't answer. I sat on my bed for I'm not sure how long. I could think only of those black eyes. At some point I heard a knock on the door and I didn't answer, but it creaked open anyway. "You all right, Dan?" Matt asked the question in a tone that indicated he didn't much care what the answer was. "Just smile, man." I looked up. My brother was grinning, and his eyes were black. I leapt to my feet and backed away from my brother, my heart pounding in my chest. "Your eyes," I gasped. Matt's grin widened, his empty black eyes fixed on me. "What's wrong, Danny? Don't you recognize your own brother?" His voice was distorted, almost inhuman. I shook my head, unable to tear my gaze away from those horrifying black orbs where my brother's eyes should be. "No, you're not Matt. What are you?" I whispered. He chuckled, a disturbing raspy sound. "Oh, but I am Matt, Danny. I'm more Matt than I've ever been." He took a slow step toward me. I retreated until my back hit the wall, trapped. "Stay away from me." "Aw, don't be like that, little brother," he crooned. "We're family, you and I, and family should stick together." He was right in front of me now, so close I could smell his rancid breath. I cringed away, squeezing my eyes shut. A cold, clammy hand grasped my chin. "Open your eyes, Danny," he whispered. "Look at me." Against my will, my eyes fluttered open. I found myself staring directly into those fathomless black pits. They seemed to swallow me, drawing me into an endless void. I screamed, but no sound came out. I was falling, spiraling into darkness. The last thing I saw was my brother's twisted grin as he murmured, "Welcome home, little brother."